I could keep going through Judges 17 to 21, showing how every single thing that happens is a direct violation of a decree or a statute or a law of the living God. You can do the homework on that for yourself. But even just the next few verses, this guy Micah installs one of his sons as a priest, first of all. And you can't do that, okay? Again, it's the Levites who are the priesthood, and no one else is allowed to function as a priest within the life of the ancient church. And when a Levite does turn up, he's from Bethlehem. Now, Joshua chapter 21, we're given a long list of cities where the Levites are supposed to live. Bethlehem isn't one of them. What's the Levites doing living in Bethlehem? Everything that's happening in these chapters is a direct violation of the law of God. And you see, that's what happens. That's what happens when people are left by God, in a sense, to become what we are by nature. When the restraining hand of God is lifted from human sinfulness. We end up in a place where there is simply no recognition of the reality of who God is or of how he has called us to live. And that has profound consequences for our life as community, as society. It's why it's so dangerous when a nation like Britain is doing at the moment leaves behind its vision of a society that is built at some level, at least, on a Christian heritage. The spiritual confusion, the loss of the knowledge of God and the awareness of the law of God leads to a devastating confusion throughout human society. See, spirituality is not a private and personal thing. Society will always build itself, or we will always build society on the basis of what we consider reality to be. And when we consider reality to be something that has no connection with or no relationship with the living God, then the society that we build is a society that will be a frightening place to live, because it will be a society where God is marginalized and where maybe even God is absent. And when God is absent, he is not restraining the reality of human sinfulness. We end up in a society that has no authority, no justice, no sense of right or wrong, no compassion. We end up in a society of total anarchy where everyone does whatever they think is right, whatever is right in their own eyes, where everyone lives as they see fit. And we will have no one tell us what to do. See, the question that's raised in this section of the book of Judges is the question of the nature of humanity, or at least the nature of fallen humanity. We live with the idea that basically we are good people. We're taught this again and again and again by our culture. We have this instinct within ourselves. Like I said in a previous video, it's part of the self-deception of being sinful. We believe that we are actually good. Well, listen, if we were good, then we wouldn't need the law of God. I think that's one of the big arguments that's being played out in this section of the book of Judges. See, what is the explanation of Judges 17 through to 21? Why are people living the way they are living? Why are they doing the things that they are doing? Well, we're told it's because Israel has no king. Now, this is working out at a societal level and at a spiritual level. I'll look at the spiritual level in the next video. But let's just think for a few minutes about how this is working out at the level of human society. There is no one in Israel who knows or who enforces the law of God. There are no authority structures. Everyone is doing what is right in their own eyes. And if there is some residual awareness of the law of God, if there is some residual sense of what might be right or wrong, there is no one with the authority, the wisdom, or the power to enforce that law. And when you're in a situation where people do not know what the law of God is, and where there is no one who has the wisdom, the authority, the power to enforce that law, you end up in a world that looks like Judges 17 through to 21. Now what's interesting is that if we were basically good people, we wouldn't really need law, would we? Basically, we would know who we were supposed to be, and because we were basically good people, we would basically do that. We would be those people. I mean, there would always be, I suppose, one or two mavericks who, for whatever reason, behave in ways that are outside what everyone knows to be right and true and good. But the society would draw them back in if we were all basically good, and the society that we built was a basically good society. Look, all over the world today, there are places where law has broken down. There's no effective exercise of law. Let me ask you this. Would you have wanted to have woken up in any of those places this morning? Isn't one of the underlying fears around this coronavirus thing that's going on, that we're living through at the moment, isn't one of the underlying fears the fear that law and order is going to break down within our own society? You see, law, we need law, and we need that law to be enforced. It's why it's so dangerous for a society not to have someone in authority, or in the language of the book of Judges, to have no king. There is not a single example in the world today, not a single example in history of a human society that didn't need law, and where that law needed to be enforced. When there is no law, or when law is not consistently enforced, society becomes a dangerous, cruel, and barbaric place. Even in the UK, where actually, by and large, there is law, and that law is, relatively speaking, it's consistently enforced and imposed. There are still places where you wouldn't want to be caught out on your own. There are places where you would not want your daughter walking home alone late at night. And what's really frightening is we just accept that as normal. That's just the way the world is. It's just common sense to know that there are places you don't want to go after dark. You know, the fact is, a fallen humanity needs the law. And our need for that law is standing testimony to our sinfulness. Law is something that God has put into human society to restrain our sin. You can read about it in Romans chapter 13. We need rulers. We need kings. We need governments. And they are put in place by God. See, there is this anxiety, I think, in the church. This sense that, you know, the law of God is a negative thing. We don't want God telling us what to do. We don't want His rules and His laws and His statutes cramping in on us and suffocating us. We want to be free to become the people that we want to be. Well, for 400 years, the church in the book of Judges has been railing against God's law. saying we don't want God telling us what to do. We want to be free to become who we truly are. Well, Judges 17 through to 21 is what happens when God's law is absent, when God's restraining hand is lifted, and when people are left, when they are free to become who they truly are. See, we read in the Bible that no one is good. No one does what is right. Now we think, hang on, that's a bit harsh, isn't it? No, it's not. Judges 17 to 21 shows us the reality of human sinfulness without divine check. And before we get all smug and self-righteous, let's just remember that when we're reading Judges 17 through to 21, we're not reading about what's going on in the big bad world out there. Judges 17 to 21 is the history of the ancient church. So what's going on within the life of Israel. Now there is stuff going on in the world, in the nations outside of Israel, but Judges 17 to 21 is about what is going on in the life of the people of God. The people who God had redeemed and entered into covenant with, into relationship with. See, this is what happens even to the church when the church doesn't take the attitude to the world that God had commanded it to. When there isn't the radical sense of separation, when there isn't the relentless clinging to God in the face of the temptation to be like the world around us.